The soft hum of the city below faded into silence as Ethan Ward leaned back in his leather chair, eyes fixed on the single sheet of paper lying on his desk. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Chicago skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, a view he had barely noticed in years. This office, this empire, WardMed Innovations, was everything he had built from the ground up, and now it all hung in the balance. Across from him, Stephen Hale, his grandfather's longtime attorney, sat quietly. The man's expression was unreadable, but his words echoed loud and clear. "It's all there, Ethan. Signed, witnessed, notarized. Your grandfather made it clear. If you're not married by your 35th birthday, control of the company passes to the board." Ethan stared at the document. A contract, a clause, a deadline. He was 34, turning 35 in exactly 92 days. "You're telling me my entire legacy depends on marital status?" he asked, voice low, clipped with disbelief. Stephen didn't flinch. "Your grandfather believed leadership without connection leads to isolation. He wanted you to have more than just success. He wanted you to build a life." Ethan laughed under his breath, humorless and sharp. "I've built something far more valuable than a life with someone. I've built innovation that saves lives." Silence settled between them, thick and heavy. The digital clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the countdown not just to a birthday, but to a decision that would change everything. The kitchen light flickered above Maya Collins as she sat at her worn-out dining table, both hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The coffee inside had gone cold hours ago, untouched, just like the stack of unopened medical bills spread out before her. Through the speakerphone, her mother's voice trembled, barely holding it together. They called again. "About the mortgage. If we don't pay something by the end of the month, Maya, we could lose the house." Maya closed her eyes and pressed her lips into a firm line. She had heard the same call last week, and the week before that. Her younger brother Noah had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. The treatments were expensive, insurance covered only a fraction. Maya's salary at a small medical design startup barely covered rent and groceries, let alone hospital stays and medication. "I'll figure something out," she said, her voice quiet but firm. It wasn't the first time she'd made that promise, but tonight it felt more desperate. Outside, the streets of Detroit lay still under a pale winter moon. Inside, hope felt like a candle burning low. She didn't cry. Maya hadn't let herself cry in months. Crying didn't pay the bills. Crying didn't fix broken systems. Then, 3 sharp knocks at the door. She froze. Visitors were rare, unexpected ones even rarer. Slowly she stood and walked to the door, her heart pounding with every step. When she opened it, a man in a charcoal coat stood on the porch, his breath visible in the cold. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a card in the other. "Miss Collins?" he asked. "I represent Ethan Ward. He'd like to meet with you, privately." The cafe was nearly empty, save for the occasional hiss of the espresso machine and the low hum of jazz from an old speaker. Maya sat near the back, nursing a fresh cup of coffee this time, her fingers tapping lightly against the ceramic as the minutes passed. At exactly 6 o'clock he walked in, Ethan Ward. Tall, composed, clean-cut in a navy coat tailored to perfection. His expression gave nothing away, no smile, no frown, just focus, like this was a meeting to negotiate a merger. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," he said, as he sat across from her. Maya nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came because, well, your offer sounds unusual." "Because it is," Ethan replied plainly. "I won't waste your time. What I'm proposing is a business arrangement, a marriage lasting no less than 12 months. In return, you'll receive full financial support, your brother's medical bills paid, your mother's home secured, and a long-term role at WardMed, if you want it." There was no pitch, no charm, just terms and delivery, as if they were discussing logistics for a product launch. Maya blinked. "And why me?" Ethan looked at her for a moment before answering. "Stephen says you're qualified, private and grounded. You're not after attention, you need help. And I need someone I can trust to play a part, quietly, competently." The truth in his words was unnerving. There were no promises of fairy tales, no false sweetness, just honesty. And yet something about the way he said it, the deliberate calm, the lack of manipulation, made her feel strangely safe. "Give me one dinner," she said slowly. "I'll listen, but I want you to know, I'm not for sale." Ethan didn't flinch. Instead, he gave a single nod. "Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, Delacroix restaurant. You'll choose the wine." Dinner at Delacroix had been quiet, formal, but not cold. Ethan had stayed true to his word. No pretense, no charm, just clear answers, calm presence, and a surprising attentiveness that left Maya more unsettled than any flirtation could have. He'd asked about her brother, about the work she wanted to do. He listened, not out of obligation, but as though he genuinely wanted to understand the woman he might call his wife. She left that evening still unsure of the future, but certain of one thing. If she had to marry a stranger, at least Ethan Ward was honest. 3 days later, they signed the marriage contract. It happened in a private law office with only a notary and Ethan's lawyer as witnesses. No vows were exchanged, just legal clauses, clean ink, and 2 rings placed on fingers like the end of a deal, rather than the beginning of something sacred. When they stepped outside, snow had just begun to fall over Chicago's frozen skyline. Ethan turned to her, quiet as always. "I'll have a car, bring your things. There's space for whatever you want to bring, or leave." He handed her a slim black envelope. Inside were keys, one to his penthouse, one to her own room. The apartment was everything she imagined, and nothing she'd ever call home. Sleek, sterile, beautiful in a distant way. Yet strangely, it felt safe. Ethan made no demands. He kept his word. No shared bed, no awkward questions, just space. Generous and silent. But what surprised Maya most was this. He didn't treat her like a trophy wife. He brought her into meetings, introduced her as a consulting product designer, and let her speak. When she suggested redesigning the pediatric insulin monitor, she half expected polite dismissal. Instead, the room went still. Until Ethan looked up and simply said, "Let's test it. Prioritize the UX model." After the meeting, in the elevator, he spoke without turning his head. "You don't speak to impress. You speak to change minds. That's rare." She met his reflection in the glass. "Maybe I'm just tired of not being heard." His lips curved, almost a flicker of something unpracticed. "Then let's make sure you are." And just like that, beneath the surface of paper and signatures, something real began to breathe. At first, they followed the script. They showed up to events hand in hand. They posed for a few photographs, her in muted tones, him in crisp, tailored suits. Ethan would always lean in just enough for the cameras, his hand resting lightly on Maya's lower back, his voice low in her ear. "We're being watched," he'd murmur. But there was no tension in the touch, no act in his tone, only care. Controlled, measured, but quietly real. Maya told herself it was all part of the arrangement, the dinners, the joint meetings, the coordinated schedules. But some things couldn't be rehearsed. Like the morning she walked into the kitchen and caught Ethan behind the paper, watching her. He didn't look away, he just folded the page and asked, "You sleep all right?" She nodded, though her chest tightened, because it was the first time in weeks someone had asked her that and meant it. Or the night he knocked on her door past midnight, eyes still sharp from reading formulas, but something softer, flickering underneath. "I was thinking about the glucose patch prototype. Do you have a few minutes?" Maya didn't hesitate. They sat on the floor of the study, surrounded by papers and sketches, and talked until the sun began to rise. Then came Boston. It was supposed to be a 3-day trip to meet pediatric specialists, but when a sudden downpour trapped them beneath a rusted cafe awning, everything shifted. Ethan, without a word, took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. "You should keep it," Maya whispered, fingers brushing the lapel. "You're shivering," he said, eyes steady on hers. No cameras, no press, no board members watching. Just a man and a woman, standing too close, beneath a sky that seemed to quiet the world. Later that night, in the hotel elevator, their hands brushed, and didn't pull away. Back in Chicago, the silence between them felt different. Not strained, not empty, just waiting. Like both of them were holding their breath, unsure if what was growing between them was allowed to live. But Maya knew. The contract might have started this, But it wasn't what was keeping them close anymore. It started with a headline: Tech CEO's sudden marriage raises eyebrows? Strategic move or secret romance? The article spread quickly, speculating everything from stock manipulation to media distraction. Maya had expected the attention. What she hadn't expected was Sienna Blake. She arrived at WardMed's annual charity gala in a midnight black gown that caught every eye in the room. Elegant, composed, and unmistakably calculated. Maya had never met her before, but it didn't take long for Sienna to introduce herself. A glass of champagne in one hand, her smile sweetened with just enough venom. "I was once engaged to Ethan," she said, her voice casual, "until he chose the company over me. I suppose things change when deadlines are involved. Maya didn't flinch. "Ethan doesn't talk much about the past," she replied evenly. "Maybe because the present keeps him busy." Sienna tilted her head, eyes sharp. "He's not great with emotions, you know. I told him once he'd never truly love anyone. He didn't argue." The words stuck. That night, back at the apartment, Maya sat in silence, the echo of Sienna's voice louder than she wanted to admit. Ethan entered quietly, removing his coat like he always did, his movements calm, practiced. But she couldn't hold it in. "Did you love her?" she asked, her voice low. He paused. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. "I thought I did," he said finally, "but maybe I never really knew what love was." Maya nodded slowly. "That's not an answer most people would admit." He sat down, resting his elbows on his knees. "I've built my life on structure, logic, efficiency. Emotions weren't part of the plan. They complicate things." She looked at him, really looked. Not the CEO, not the man on magazine covers, just Ethan. "And what about now?" she asked softly. His gaze met hers, less guarded than usual. "Now, you're the one variable I didn't account for." In the days that followed, whispers grew louder, rumors swirled, that Maya was a placeholder, a strategic front, a name on a contract. Then came the email, an emergency board meeting requested by none other than Gregory Blake, Sienna's father and senior board member. The agenda: review the CEO's judgment in light of recent personal decisions. The test had arrived. The morning light poured into the glass-walled boardroom, but the air inside was cold, sharp with judgment and expectation. Ethan Ward entered exactly on time, his expression composed, eyes clear. Beside him, Maya walked with quiet confidence, no longer hidden behind a role she didn't choose, but standing in one she'd earned. The meeting opened with financials, expansion updates, and quarterly reviews. Ethan answered each question with precision, the way he always had. But everyone knew the real reason they were there. Gregory Blake, seated at the head of the table, leaned forward. "Before we close, there's one final matter," he said, his tone neutral but edged. "Your recent marriage has sparked concern. Is your personal relationship affecting your ability to lead objectively?" The room went still. Ethan stood. His voice, when it came, was steady, not defensive but grounded. "Yes," he said. "I married Maya Collins. That is public record." A flicker of smugness crossed Gregory's face. But Ethan didn't stop there. "And no," he continued, "my judgment is not compromised, it's clearer than ever." He looked around the room, meeting each gaze head-on. "Maya isn't a liability. She's the reason our pediatric initiative even exists. Her design proposal opened a new market, and the team listens to her, for good reason. This company doesn't need less of her, it needs more." Before Gregory could reply, Maya rose to her feet. "I didn't ask for this spotlight," she began. "But I did the work. I brought ideas to the table and I backed them with results. My name didn't build my credibility, my contributions did." She paused, eyes firm. "I'm not here because I married a CEO. I'm here because I know what I'm doing." A long silence followed, then a quiet nod from one board member. Another leaned forward, intrigued. The tide had shifted. The vote passed, decisively. Ethan remained CEO. Maya was appointed Director of Strategic Product Innovation. As the room emptied, Ethan turned to her, not as a strategist or protector, but as a man truly seeing the woman beside him. "I thought I brought you into this to save the company," he said softly, "but what you saved was me." Maya smiled. You didn't bring me in, Ethan. I walked in. And I stayed. In the weeks that followed, they returned to their work, shoulder to shoulder, no longer bound by obligation, but by something quieter, stronger. A soft winter light filled the WardMed design studio as Maya sat by the tall window, a steaming mug of tea in her hand and her laptop open beside scattered product sketches. Outside, Chicago was waking up slowly, just like her. Exactly 1 year had passed since she signed the marriage contract. 1 year since she walked into Ethan Ward's world, unsure of her place, unsure if this strange arrangement would save anything or ruin everything. Now, she was no longer just a name on a legal document. She was Director of Strategic Product Innovation, a respected leader in the R&D department, and the woman who shared Ethan's home, his life, and, most unexpectedly, his heart. The office door opened quietly behind her. Ethan stepped in, not in a suit, but in a soft white shirt, sleeves rolled up, no pretense, no performance, just him. He placed a thick envelope on her desk. "The original contract," he said simply. 1 year, today. Maya looked at the envelope, then up at him. "Do you want me to sign something else?" she asked, half teasing. He shook his head. "No, I keep it to remind myself how far we've come, from ink and terms to something you can't measure." She stood slowly, walked to him, and rested her head gently against his chest. "I used to think love was for other people, people without obligations. People with easier lives," she whispered. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, pressing his cheek to her hair. "And now," she smiled against him, "now, I know love is a choice you make, every single day." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Then let's keep choosing each other. No signatures, no clauses, no countdown. Just two people, choosing to stay." The rooftop garden swayed gently under the breeze of an early spring morning. The scent of blooming jasmine and lake air drifted in from Lake Michigan, brushing against the edges of a world that now felt entirely different. Maya walked slowly between the raised flower beds, one hand resting instinctively on her rounded belly, cradling not one but 2 heartbeats. Behind her, footsteps approached, steady and familiar. Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin lightly on her shoulder. He didn't speak right away, he just breathed her in, as if grounding himself in this quiet moment. "Boy or girl?" he asked softly. Maya smiled, her voice teasing. "Both." He stilled. "You're serious?" She turned in his arms, nodding. "Twins. A boy and a girl. Got the confirmation this morning." For a second, Ethan didn't say a word. Then a laugh escaped him, genuine, surprised, full of wonder. A sound she rarely heard but cherished every time. "We did it," he whispered, voice catching. Maya shook her head gently. "No, love, we're just beginning." They spent that afternoon choosing names. Ethan wanted to honor his grandfather, Harold, the man who unknowingly set everything in motion. Maya chose Grace because that's what they'd been given, despite every reason not to find it. Months later, in a sunlit hospital room filled with quiet joy and new beginnings, 2 cries filled the air. Ethan held his daughter, Maya held their son. And in that moment, no contracts were needed. They were simply a family, not by fate, not by law, but by the quiet, everyday choice to stay.